The book is better than the movie? Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. I think I'm saying the book is better than the movie. I just hate it. Yes, that's my life goal, but I just waited around for it. Right. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a very exciting video for you guys. I'm gonna be reading books from a Goodreads list named The Best Paranormal Romance Series. It's this. So this list is based on paranormal romance series, not just singular individual books. So we will not be reading standalones. However, the list does say that it must only comprise the first book in the series and that at least 3 books in the series must be published in order to qualify for this list. I will only be reading up to number 10, and when I say I will be reading, I mean I will be reviewing some that I have already read and remember perfectly, and I will be reading the other ones. Let's go through the list. The first book on the list is Dark Lover from the Black Dagger Brotherhood by J.R. Ward. I have read this book more than once, so we'll already be able to review this book. The second one is Twilight. I have read this book, but it was such a long time ago, and also I read it in French, so I think I may be rereading Twilight, which is going to be interesting, especially since everyone is reading Midnight Sun right now, so a lot of people have been rereading Twilight. Yeah, we'll see what happens. The next book on the list is Halfway to the Grave from the series Night Huntress by Janine Frost. Then number 4 on the list is Dark Fever from the series Fever by Karen Marie Moning. I don't know how you pronounce her last name, I'm so sorry. I've never read this one before, I've never heard of it before, so no idea what it talks about. Number 5 on the list is Dead Until Dark, which is the first Sookie Stackhouse book by Charlene Harris. So that's the books that inspired the TV show True Blood. I read the series several times, once in French and once in English, so I do remember it fairly well. I may have to reread it, I'm not sure, because it is the first book. It's not my favourite, so I don't think I remember it as well as some of the other ones. Number 6 on the list is City of Bones from the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. I have read this one literally last year, so I remember it fairly well. I have enough, I think, to be able to do a quick review from my point of view of this book, but I haven't read the other ones in the series. The next book on the list is Mooncold, which is the first book in Mercy Thompson, and that is written by Patricia Briggs. I've definitely read this one, but again, I'm pretty sure I read it when I was in uni actually, and that was already a very long time ago. So it's likely been like a little bit less than 10 years since I've read it. So definitely don't remember it well enough to be able to review it, so I'm going to reread that one for sure. Then number 8 we have Hush Hush from the Hush Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick. I've never read that one, I have no idea what it talks about. The cover looks like it's going to have angels / dark angels / maybe demons in it, I'm not sure. Quite interested in knowing what it's going to be about. I'm hopeful it's not going to be too emo, because I don't know, the cover just gives me dark emotional type of vibes, and I'm really not into that kind of books. Then number 9 on the list is Angel's Blood from the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh. I've never read any books by Nalini Singh, so I've not read this one or the series and do not love the cover. I pretty much hate it, but the book could be really good and the series could be really good, so. And then finally the last book on this list, number 10, is Magic Bites, which is from the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. I'm quite excited to read this because I've heard a lot of good things about the author, but I've never read her books, so hopefully I will like it as much as others have, and I will let you know how I feel about it. So that's actually quite a few that I do have to read. That's it for this little intro. I will let you guys know when I start reading. I'm just gonna first prepare my little review of the first book on the list, which I have already read several times, so I know it well enough to be able to do a review. I'm just going to write some things down to make sure that I got my thoughts together. Then I will film that, and then I will start reading the other books. So I've already filmed the introduction to this video, but then I realized I want to add some simple rules to it. First of all, I think I'm gonna separate the video into two parts, because I realized when I was looking at the books that it is quite a lot. And the second thing that I wanted to add to this little intro is going to be my ranking system. I guess the purpose of this video is to see whether I agree with this ranking, whether I think that this list on Goodreads is a list that matches my ranking as well, and how I feel about these books. My first points are going to go towards my overall enjoyment of the book. My second ranking system is going to be around the romance aspect. But basically, because this is a list that is called the best paranormal romance series, I want to see whether I agree with that statement and whether I think those books belong in this list and that they should be considered the best paranormal romances. So I'm going to rate the romance aspect of each book. And then the third thing I'm going to be rating is whether I want to read the next book in the series / the overall series, everything in it. I think that's everything. That's my 3 rating systems for this video. Let's start with the first book on the list, Dark Clover. I have read this book more than once. I have reread this series more than once, but I never actually quite finished the series. This is a book about vampires, but the vampires in this world are quite different from the ones you may have seen in other books and other works of fiction. So this series in general has each book focusing on one member of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. It is a group of elite vampires in a world where vampires have their own culture, their own language, their own everything. So the Black Dagger Brotherhood in there is a group of elite warriors amongst the vampires. So they were bred and raised to be the best of their warriors. They are apparently like much bigger and more muscular and taller and wider and all of that than the average vampire. Each of these books focuses on one of the members of the Black Dagger Brotherhood and their romantic interest. In the first book, you follow Wrath. Yeah, they all have names like that. Now, the first book follows Wrath, who is the king of the vampires. He's also at the head of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. In the beginning of the book, he loses one of his best fighters and best friends. I think his name is Darius. So Darius gets killed. It's at the very beginning, and this isn't a spoiler. And before he dies, he pretty much says to Wrath that Wrath has to take care of his daughter. Now, his daughter is half human, half vampire. From the lore of the world that we're in, if you're gonna turn into a vampire, it's really, really painful. It's really hard to survive it, and it's like a whole change. They call it the transformation of this change, something like that, where the person basically needs a lot of help, including the purest possible vampire blood to help them. Wrath is like this really broody type of character. He pretty much refuses originally, but then Darius dies and he's like, shit, I gotta do this. I gotta go and check on this girl. Her name is Beth, and we follow both Wrath and Beth's point of views in the book. Beth is like a journalist who's at the bottom of the chain in her workplace. She's trying to work her way up in order to stop just editing the big boys' papers, and she's pretty much being treated in a pretty sexist manner by her boss and by her colleagues and everything. She's not having a great time. She doesn't love her life. I don't want to give away too much, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but yeah, obviously these two are the main romantic partnership in this book. This is a very sexy book. A lot of stuff happens, including sexy time, and it's really well written. It's a hot book. Like, if you're ever looking for a nice, sweet, not too much type of romantic erotica novel, I would definitely recommend that book. It doesn't have too much on, it's not non-stop. I think I can definitely rate this book to be overall super enjoyable because I have reread it many times and do plan on rereading it if I reached a point again where I've forgotten enough about it. It's kind of where I want to reread a book, is when I've forgotten enough about it and I'm like, okay, it's time, I can reread it and I know I will enjoy it again. So I would definitely rate it quite high for overall enjoyment. I absolutely agree that this book has a great romance. I do feel like it's not the best in the series, but the rule on the list did say, although this is rating the overall series, only put the first book in the series on the list. So I think that makes sense, because I think the second or the third book, I'm not quite sure which one. There's one that's my favorite and it's not the first one. But the overall series I think is really good. And I would definitely put it on that list and think that it deserves its spot on that list. The romance is hot, sexy, it's good. Do I want to read the next book in the series? Yes, obviously I have read the other books in the series and I have also reread them several times, because that first one, I like rereading it first, but it's not actually my favourite in the series. So should it be number one on this list? Well, we'll see. I haven't read the other books yet, but so far so good. It's got all three of my rating systems are like pretty high up for this book, so I agree that it should be at the top of the list somewhere, at least in the top 10 for sure. So yes, the next book I'm going to be reading is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer from the series Twilight. Okay, so I have started reading Twilight. I am currently on page 70. I'm currently having the time of my life. I don't know why. I just feel like I'm getting some like teenager flashbacks and really enjoying reading something so silly and not that well written, but kind of just fun. I kind of feel like at the moment Bella and Edward's relationship, which is non-existent but they're just, getting to know each other, is so much more teenager-like than what I remembered. And it's so funny that Edward is meant to be this really old character that, obviously is I don't remember how old he's meant to be, but he's quite an old vampire technically. But he reads like such a teenager as well, because him and Bella are bickering non-stop, and I forgot that they get angry and bickery at each other, and it's just kind of funny and I really like it. I just feel like, although I am not on the let's all hate Kristen Stewart bandwagon, I'm not a part of that, but I do feel like the way the character was portrayed in the movie was so much more calm and quiet and collected and a bit like aloof and a little bit like, I don't really care about teenage boys or whatever, I don't really care about these silly high school things. But in the book, she just feels so much more like alive and so much more angry at everything and just pissed off at everything. And I don't know, she feels like a proper teenager. I kind of enjoy the way she was written. I do feel like the way that Bella is obsessing over Edward is already a little bit intense, a little bit much, and I feel like personally when I was in high school I would obsess over a boy, but that would last 2 weeks and then I would obsess over another boy. And I feel like the fact that she's already saying, oh, he's not talked to me in this many days and I'm feeling depressed, I'm like, girl, that's a little bit, you maybe should see someone, is all I'm saying. But apart from that, I'm kind of enjoying it. It's a fun read. But yeah, that's about it. It's only page 70. I will probably get back to you guys once I reach more towards the end of the book and remember a little bit more about what happens. It is Wednesday, 7 p.m. and I have just reached page 350 of Twilight, which is about 100 pages before the end of the book. So I'm at the point of we're finally reaching the climax in the moment where Bella is running away and is gonna lie to her dad that she's like fed up with Fox and going back home to Phoenix because they've just encountered the other vampires that are like passing through their town, and these guys are not vegetarians, so one of the guys smelled the scent of Bella and really wants to track her down and hunt her and eat her, basically. There are so many things that I am actually really enjoying in this book that I didn't think I would. For instance, I feel like there's so many more good dialogues than there is in the movie. I feel like there's so many moments in the movie that were ruined by terrible dialogues and terrible scripting. There's like a point where she's having this chat with her friend Jessica and it just feels like in the movie she really just doesn't care at all what those girls at school think or doesn't really want to be friends with them, and she's so much more aloof and distant from them. But in the book it feels so much more like it's kind of a accidental friendship that's building, because she's like the new girl and everyone is like, oh my god, it's the new girl, but it is building and it does feel like very typical teenager girl dialogues, so I'm kind of enjoying that. I'm really actually loving that part. And then I just really feel like the way that she's telling Edward that she knows his secret, and the moment she does, and the dialogue that surrounds that, is also so much better in the book than it was in the movie. There's the part where he takes her to that clearing at the top of the mountain in the forest or something to show her what he looks like in the daylight when he's all sparkly and shit. And I just feel like it was written in a much, much less cringy way than it was in the movie. And there's so many steps like that. Like, he never says, hang on, little spider monkey or some shit. I can't remember what he says in the fucking movie, but it was just so ridiculous. Every single time that scene makes me cringe so much. I think he calls her little coward or something. There's so many sentences I feel like have been subverted in a bad way into the movie and were taken out of context from the book, out of the bigger dialogue. But I don't know, I feel like the book is better than the movie? Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. I think I'm saying the book is better than the movie. I'm not gonna lie, I was really bothered by the scene where he admits that he's been coming every single night to watch over her sleep. I do think that's really weird, and that's not something that should have been romanticized or glamorized in this book for teenage girls to pine after, because it doesn't feel very healthy. It feels quite toxic. It feels a little bit controlling and abusive. I don't like that part. One thing I really enjoyed the first time I read the books compared to the movies is that there is so much more in-depth moments where you dive into the stories of all the other vampires and characters. So you have so much more backstory for Carlisle, and I think in one of the books at some point you delve into Rosalie's story, and it's just really much more interesting and something that was lacking in the movie and made it makes sense. They had to cut some bits. They couldn't put everything in the movies, but I think that's a big part of the books, and something I did genuinely remember from them was the backstories and the fact that they were so much more interesting and cool and fun to read, and part of the appeal to the books. All the other characters and all the other vampires in Edward's family seem so much more to interact with Bella and become part of her family, and you have so many more passages where you really feel like they've got their own personalities. And I do feel like, I can say a lot of bad shit about Stephanie Meyer, but I do feel like she wrote well-rounded characters in some aspects. Like, some very brief moment and glimpses into one character gives you so much more about their personality than some other books that spend pages and pages giving me nothing. And I don't know, I feel like the book did it better. I think that's about it for tonight. I may finish it by tonight, but I'll probably only catch up with you guys tomorrow if I do. I have just finished reading Twilight. It is still Wednesday, but it's now close to midnight. How can I summarize my feelings about this book? So, I would maintain what I said earlier, which is that I did enjoy it, that I did feel like it was quite an enjoyable, fast-paced, fun read, but towards the end, like just the very ending with Bella constantly asking Edward, non-fucking stop, don't leave me, promise this, transform me into a vampire, please don't leave me, and then bickering back and forth about this. Like, it wasn't even cringe or sickening, like, you know, brand new couples who are all over each other and have too much PDA going on. It wasn't even like that. It just felt boring and annoying, and I didn't care about it. I feel like I really enjoyed everything that happened towards the climax when she was being pursued by that vampire, and the fact that she was the one who came up with a lot of the plans to escape him. I enjoyed all of the stories and the backstories that were revealed about other vampires in the story. I did feel though that the book took a very, very long time to get there, and that for the longest time it was just her love story with Edward developing, then her being introduced to his family and her introduction to the vampires and the vampire world and everything to do with that. But the vampire pursuing her and all of the dramatic events that led to the climax came in really late in the book. So the first question is, did I overall enjoy the book? Yes, overall I really had a lot of fun. I would definitely consider this an enjoyable read. I read it quite fast and I just overall enjoyed myself. It felt like a silly, fun book to read. And, you know, like just a little guilty pleasure type of thing, but also it wasn't that badly written. There were plenty of characters that were great and had great backstories. I just felt like more attention should have been paid to them and less to the love story that just wasn't that interesting. Which answers the second rating, which is how do I rate the romance? Yeah, that's really how I feel about it. I've already said it. I find it boring. I find it overly intense in a way that isn't necessary and not very healthy either. There's a very Romeo and Juliet aspect to their romance that I kind of hate because it's so intense and it's like nothing else exists and no one else matters. And the fact that this book focused on a silly romance that was kind of frankly boring bothered me because it could have been so much more. I just feel like it could have been so much more. I know it wasn't, I can't rewrite history, and a lot of people would see the appeal in the romance, so I get it and I get how the commercial success of this book was based around that. But for me personally, I just feel like I would be so much more interested if she was, even if Stephanie Meyer, for instance, instead of writing another book about like the same fucking story written from the other character's perspective, like Midnight Sun, I would be so much more interested if she were to write Carlisle's story or Esme's and how she and Carlisle met and she became a vampire because of him and stuff. I don't know. Or Alice's backstory, the fact that she has no memories of her human life and that we discover towards the end that she was actually in an asylum and that she had barely ever / never seen daylight, and that it was a vampire who was in love with her, who worked at the asylum she was in, and to protect her from James decided to transform her into a vampire as well and then got killed. Like, just that deserves its own book. That just sounds really fun and entertaining to read and cool, and I want to know more about it. But all it got is like a short paragraph in this big love story that I did not enjoy that much. So this leads us to the third question, which is, do I want to read the next books in the series? I have already read the other books in the series before. I do remember, very similarly to my experience here, that a lot of the things I liked about them was discovering other characters' backstories. So I want to say yes because of that, but also I don't think I will this time around because there are so many other books that have a priority for me. I may at some point. I'm not putting it on a complete no either. It's kind of a maybe. And then finally, it's not really in my rating system, but because this is a top 10 that I'm reading, I'm gonna decide whether to shuffle it above or below or further down the 10 books I'm gonna read. So at the very end of part 2 of this video, I will do my own top 10 with those 10 books I've read and decide whether they should stay where they are in the ranking at the moment or not. So do I feel like Twilight should be in the number 2 spot at the moment? Because the only other book I have talked about in this list is Dark Lover by G.R. Ward. I do think that Twilight should be below that because it is a list that focuses on the romance aspect of these books, and I don't feel like the romance is what sold me on Twilight. Therefore, I do think it should be below that book. I think that's about it for my conclusion on Twilight. I'm gonna leave it at that because it is past midnight now and I should probably go to bed because it is a weekday, therefore I have work tomorrow. I will see you guys later for the next book. Okay, please ignore my hair, my face, everything about me. I am gross right now. I have started the next book on the list, and it is Halfway to the Grave by Janine Frost, a Night Huntress novel. I hate it. I don't know how else to say this, and I don't know how not to be mean, because I just hate it. I'm still gonna read on. It's not that torturous to read. There is a small aspect of it that it's okay with me, which is that it is light-hearted. It is an easy read, I guess. And I might be able to still finish it fast enough. But It doesn't really meet my expectations of what I thought this series was gonna be. It's Friday night. To tell you the story, this book tells the story of Catherine Crowfield, or Cat Crowfield, who is a half vampire, half human girl. And from the very beginning, she tells the story of how her mom, who is human, was raped years ago by a vampire, and that's how Cat was born. She was only told this by her mother when she was 16, and since then she's been hell-bent on hunting vampires and killing them. How she does this is by going into clubs at night and luring them, so she tries to be all sexy and stuff, and once she's got a bite, literally, she then stabs the vampire with her stake. One night she is trying to hunt and find a vampire, and she focuses on one who is quite different from the others and doesn't want anything to do with her, so she goes on to her next victim. The night after that, on a high from her great success of killing vampires, she comes back to the same club, and the same vampire that she tried to accost the night before, is there and tells her he's ready now. And then it turns out it's a trap, and when she wakes up she's bound and kidnapped in a cave where he lives or whatever. She discovers that his name is Bones and that he's a vampire who hunts other vampires as well. And they kind of make a pact together that they're gonna help each other out to hunt vampires, because vampires cannot tell that she is one of their kind because she is half human. So they hear her heartbeat, and so they're lured easily, and if she's able to train harder and be better at fighting and everything, which he knows a lot about, then they can work together and get some vampires together. The premise is kind of fun. This was obviously written at a light when bitlit was a huge thing. Yeah, I was excited for the premise because I like the genre in general, but it really disappointed me so far. I'm literally only 50 pages in, and everything I've marked up so far are things I didn't really like. I don't love the writing style. I think it's not greatly written. It's a little bit gauche and not very fun to read. And she's a dumb bitch. Like, I just hate the fact that she's a dumb bitch. She's one of the typical characters. And obviously this is old as well, and it wasn't a trope maybe that we saw as much at the time, and maybe now it's been so overdone that we're so fucking fed up with it. But she's the perfect example of that trope of, I'm a badass character who can kill on her own, and I'm a badass chick, whatever. And then as soon as she meets the main male character, who's obviously going to be the romantic interest, she fumbles around and like trips and doesn't manage to get the job done and is terrible at it and just does not prove at all that she is a badass like she's been saying. And it's the perfect example of show, don't tell. The book isn't doing that. It's not managing to do that. She's just telling us all the time how badass she is and that she's killed many vampires and whatever. She does it once and it's not very, very impressive, and then she's just being an idiot and like blushing every 5 seconds. Oh yeah, the other thing that bothers me is things like the fact that Bones has a thick British accent and uses a lot of British slang, and this meant to be British. I hate when authors who are not British try and compensate for that fact by adding it on and really like layering it over and over again. And then the whole, at some point he guesses what she really wants to do is basically to find her father and kill him. And she's like, yes, he's right, that's exactly what I wanted to do all along. And she doesn't talk about it at all before that moment. Like, instead of just killing all those vampires because you hate vampires so much and you're like, wow, I want to kill all of them immediately after they try to hit on me, you could have like interrogated one. You could have like tried at least, just asked some questions or whatever. I don't know, anything more than that, more than just waiting around and being like, yes, that's my life goal, but I just waited around for it. Right, that makes sense. I don't know, I'm not convinced by it, and I don't really like the main character so far. It's written in a way like at some point, I glanced at him through lowered lashes. I'd never spoken of my differences to anyone like this before, even my mother. It upset her to know about them, let alone discuss them. She is non-stop, I'm not like other girls, but in a sad way, like I'm a sad bitch. I think that's all I've got for this. For now, I will catch up with you guys later when I've read a little bit more. I kind of took a break from reading Halfway to the Grave But I've now started reading it again, and hopefully one day we'll be done with this video, because I'm struggling. I'm genuinely struggling. I think one of the main issues I've got is that I'm not loving this book. I don't really like the writing style or the story at the moment, and this is kind of impeding my progress. The next problem I've got, which I think has more to do with when the book came out, because it is like from 2007. Part of her training is to be able to lure the vampires better, so she gets kind of like a makeover and gets dressed into like skin tight dresses. The main character keeps bashing them and being like, oh, the skank dress or the slut clothes or whatever. She keeps slut shaming stuff herself. That just really bothered me. But I am willing to give the author a benefit of the doubt here, because it feels like the main character was brought up very religiously by kind of a crazy mom who's like, vampires are evil and one raped me, therefore I'm going even more crazy and you should kill all of them. And I feel like that's totally normal for my own daughter to be treated like shit by myself because she's half vampire, and tell her that she's got a monster inside of her. Anyway, I kind of feel like maybe that goes with the character development thing, and just maybe not because the author herself thinks that skin tight clothes are slutty and that being a slut is bad. There are so many passages, chapters like where it's like big paragraphs, like 3 pages long, where she's basically saying how hot Bones is, and it's like, I get it, you want to bone him, huh? But also, we don't need the constant reminder. Like, it just feels like that's part of the bad writing, and maybe I'm being very judgmental here, but it doesn't do it for me. One thing that the author does know how to write is the sexual tension. There is so much of it between Kat and Bones, and I kind of feel like she writes that really well, and I can understand why people would have voted for this book as like a good romance, because the romance aspect of it is good. It's just everything else that's shit. So it's kind of like the exact opposite of Twilight, I guess. Okay, I can't believe this, but I have finally finished Halfway to the Grave by Janine Frost. It took me a while. I think I've just checked my Goodreads and it says I started it on August 13th and it is September 7th today. I have many conflicting feelings about this book. I'd say overall I ended up giving it 2 stars, mostly because I really feel like I wanted to give it 1 star for most of the book and that's it. But then I really enjoyed the ending somehow. I felt like the ending really lifted the rest of the book and made me actually want to know what was going to happen next and read the next books. But it was really the ending that made me feel like, hey, this is not so bad. So I would say it almost feels like maybe the author was setting up the way the books were gonna go, because I think it's quite a large series that has got a lot of books in it, and I feel like the first book was almost a setup and kind of that prologue rather than a real book. It just didn't feel like there was anything redeemable about Kat at the beginning. Towards the end, I felt like she turned into a much more badass character, but almost unrealistically so. It does feel a little bit Mary Sue-esque, like she's suddenly super strong in ways that seem almost impossible. I don't know. I liked the action-packed moments the best out of everything. I'd say that and the sexual tension between her and Bones were really well written, and kind of almost feels like if it was just that in the book I would have enjoyed it so much more. Something I had not realised at all was that I really think that Bones is based off Spike in Buffy, because he's described as like being quite lean, super pale. At some point some other characters call him the albino boy, and he's got really pale blonde hair, almost white. And then there's a scene where they're talking about Christmas presents or something. She's like, oh, I was gonna get you a jacket, and he's like, what kind of jacket? And she's like, this long black leather one, something like that. And it's just, yeah, that's what Spike wears. The ending, the last 2 or 3 chapters were clearly nothing to do with the overall story in this book, and it was just a setup for the next book. And it made me feel like if that's the case, then I'm much more interested in reading the next book. Okay, so now for the questions that I'm asking myself after each of these books in this series. First of all, the overall enjoyment of the book. This is what I'm saying, it's the 2 stars rating. I feel like overall I disliked the main character. I didn't want to pick up the book. It took me over 2 weeks to read it. So my overall enjoyment of the book, bad. The romance itself, I'm ambivalent about the romance itself. I feel like there were so many cringy moments. I didn't really like a lot of the aspects of the two characters, but there was a lot of sexual tension. The sex scenes were really well written. A lot of that part was done quite well, and therefore I would kind of say it's average, because it should be more than just the sex. It should be more than just the attraction and the lust, and anything else to do with like their actual relationship and the way they talk to each other and the romance itself. It's just, I guess I wasn't there for it, not because of the romance so much, but because of the personalities of the two characters. I just wasn't there for that. Do I want to read the next book in the series? Actually, yes, but only because of the very ending and the last 3 to 4 chapters. I feel like otherwise I wouldn't really be convinced and I wouldn't want to read another book of it. It's such a strange feeling, because for the entire time I was reading it, I was like, I'm never going to want to pick up another one of these books. And then by the very, very end, I was like, actually, I am curious and I kind of want to read the next one at some point, just not straight away. Okay, so the last question is, where do I place it in the ranking so far? So the books I've read so far are Dark Lover by G.R. Ward, Twilight, the second one, and then this one is the third one, Halfway to the Grave. So far I'm keeping it at number 3 on the top 10 of this list, but I definitely think it's going to go lower as we go on. It's just that it's the bottom for now because I've only read 3, and I don't want to put it any higher than Twilight or Dark Lover. The next book I'm going to read in the series is Dark Fever by Karen Murray Moaning. I've not read anything at all about this book, actually. I know absolutely nothing about this book, except that it's paranormal romance and that it's part of a series and the first one in it. I've got higher hopes because I feel like I've seen more stuff about this book recently, so perhaps it hasn't aged as much as Halfway to the Grave. I will talk to you guys later.